Today we'll be looking at chapter 3, biology chapter 3, okay? And the topic for chapter 3 is the movement of substances into or out of the cells. The movement of substances into and out of the cells. Remember yesterday I even mentioned this picture just depicts what I was saying yesterday. I even say if you peel a potato and we create a small hole and you pour water in it, you see how it's a semi-permeable membrane. The water will move from the region of higher concentration when you add the most water to the region of lower concentration. So today we'll be talking about the movement of both gas molecules and liquid molecules, the movement from one concentration region to another concentration region. So that's what this chapter is about. Chapter 3 is about the movement of molecules, whether be them gas molecules or water molecules or ions, from region of higher concentration to the region of lower concentration, or the region of lower to higher, if it's moving against concentration gradient, as in the case of active transport. So today we'll be looking at three things. The first one is diffusion. The first one we'll be looking at is diffusion. The first one will be diffusion. So, three things we'll be looking at in this chapter. The first one will be diffusion. Okay? Diffusion is still big. Okay, let's reduce. First one will be diffusion. Okay? Diffusion. The second one will be osmosis. And the third one will be active transport. So these three methods is the method that I use for movement of molecules from one region to another. Okay, these are the three methods that I use for the movement of molecules or substances from one concentration region to another concentration region. So the second one is osmosis, and the third one is active transport. The third one is active transport. So this chapter covers these three phenomena. Okay? Active transport. The third one is the active transport. Now let's take a look at them one after the other. We're going to start with the first one, which is diffusion. We started with the first one, which is diffusion. Okay, so there are things that is expected for us to cover in this chapter, like we'll be able to describe diffusion states, the energy for diffusion, where it comes from, and so on and so forth. Describe the importance of diffusion, and investigate some factors that affect the rate of diffusion of a gas molecule. Okay, diffusion not only for gas, also sometimes can happen for liquid. So substances move into and out of a cell by a process known as diffusion. By what? Diffusion. So it's not the only way, but we are considering this way for this time being. So substances can move into a cell, or substances can move out of a cell, of a plant, of an animal, any cell, whether it's bacterial cell, it's an animal cell, it's a plant cell. Substance can go into the cell, and substance can go out of the cell by a process known as diffusion. By a process known as what? Diffusion. And diffusion is defined as the movement of molecules or ions down the concentration gradient. What does this mean? What it means is that the substance will move from the higher concentration region or area to lower concentration area. Higher to lower. That's the meaning of down the concentration gradient. So when we say down the concentration gradient, we are saying substance will move from higher region to lower region. Okay? If we say against the concentration gradient, it means it's going to be moving against. Against means from lower to higher. When we say against concentration gradient, we say that would be for active transport. When substance move against concentration gradient, meaning those substances will move from lower concentration region to higher concentration when we come to active transport. And in such case, you need energy from respiration. You need energy from respiration in order for active transport to take place. But in diffusion, is the movement of molecules and ions. It could be gas molecule, it could be ions, it could be whatever. The movement of molecules or movement of ions from region of higher concentration to region of lower concentration. That's the meaning. That's what we mean by the movement of ions and molecules down a concentration gradient. It's usually down the slope like this. So if you have a graph, you can see this is where you have higher concentration of ions. This is where you have lower concentration of ions. In this place, you have lower concentration of ions. You see? So diffusion is when the substance are moving down the slope. When the substance, the ions and the molecules are moving down the slope from higher concentration area to lower concentration area. This is for higher, this one. This one is for higher, this one. Okay? This higher concentration area of the ions. There are more ions here, or there are more molecules here than this place. There are more molecules than this place. Here is lower. Here is for lower concentrations of ions. Lower concentration of ion. So diffusion is a process whereby substances from here will move away from this high region to lower region. Okay, moving down the slope against down the concentration gradient down. So the word down the concentration, it simply means you are moving down the slope. It simply means you are moving down the slope. Okay, now, and it's different from osmosis. We say diffusion is different from osmosis because osmosis requires semi-permeable membrane. We're going to talk about that. It's different from osmosis as it refers to any substance, whether it's gas, liquid, and it does not require a membrane. Diffusion does refer to any substance, whether it's gas. So diffusion can happen to gas molecules or gas ions. Diffusion can happen to liquid molecules, okay, or ions. Okay, so it refers to substances, whether it's gas, whether it's liquid. That's for diffusion, number one. If they ask you what's the difference between osmosis and diffusion. Number two is that osmosis requires a semi-permeable membrane, while diffusion does not require a membrane. Diffusion does not require a membrane. Okay, doesn't need a membrane in order for it to happen. But osmosis requires a membrane, a permeable membrane for the water molecules to move. Okay, for the molecules to move. Then another thing we need to take note of is that this diffusion, and it's affected by factors such as temperature. If you want the substance to move faster, to diffuse from the region of higher concentration to lower concentration, if you want the substance molecules, like your perfume. I use perfume in chapter 2 to do an example. When you spray perfume in your cloth, that point where you spray your perfume is the higher concentration region. Now when you move around, the air will take the perfume and it will smell around, okay, even a little further from you. So to lower regions, to lower areas. So people a little bit further from you can still perceive the smell of the perfume, okay, because the molecules of the perfume will move out from your shirt and move around in the air. So they diffuse from your shirt and move around in the air. So there are factors that affect this. One of the factors is temperature. If you increase temperature, it will increase the rate of diffusion of a gas molecule. If we increase temperature, definitely it will affect the rate of diffusion of gas molecule. Another factor that affect the rate of diffusion of molecule is the diffusion distance. The farther you go, the lesser it becomes. The farther away from the higher concentration region, the less you can perceive the smell of the perfume. The less you can perceive the smell of the perfume. So the diffusion area is a factor. If you make the area very big, then the rate of diffusion will be very small, will be low. Okay. Another one is the surface area to volume ratio. Not just surface area to volume ratio. Surface area to volume ratio. What do we mean by that? Okay, I'm going to come to that, and I will use diagram to explain this one. I will show you a picture or a diagram to explain surface area to volume ratio. Now let's move on. What is diffusion? We've already explained diffusion, right? We've already explained diffusion. The movement of ions and molecules. From region of higher concentration to region of lower concentration. Diffusion of perfume particles, okay, from the point of usage to point around you, to smell around you, and everyone perceives it, like we said already. All matter, including your perfume, they're made up of particles such as the atoms, the molecules, and the ions, right? Because your perfume is also matter. It's a gas, so it's also a matter. It's also a part of the state of matter. Individual particles of perfume can evaporate to become a gas. The particles can evaporate to become a gas. Now, the particles of the gas are constantly moving, and that's what we call kinetic motion. They're constantly moving, and the kinetic energy causes the particles to move. Kinetic energy that they acquire cause them to move. And the gas spread outward through a process called the diffusion. The gas of the perfume will spread out by a process known as diffusion. Now, what is the concentration gradient and how it's related to diffusion? Like we said, we have 2 points, point A and point B. Now, you can see here has more molecules or more particles of a particular thing. Let's say the perfume, the point of usage of the perfume. You have more molecules or more particles, and this is the area it's going to smell to. Diffusion is the movement of these molecules from the region of this higher region to a region of lower region, okay, down the concentration gradient. So molecule diffuse down a concentration gradient. They will diffuse to area where the particles are not so much. They will move away from area point A to point B, okay, and there's a certain what we call diffusion distance, a certain distance that needs to be covered, okay. If the distance is too much, then diffusion becomes less. Okay, so this is very important. There are more particles in point A than in point B, like we have stated, and there is a concentration difference between these 2 points. Here is higher concentration, and here is lower concentration. Now, concentration gradient is the difference in the concentration between the two regions. When you hear the word gradient, concentration gradient is the difference in concentration between the two regions. Okay, now let's move to the next one. The next one says, what is the concentration gradient and how it's related to diffusion? What's the concentration gradient and how does this relate to diffusion? You can see the particles of a gas or of a molecule. Let's just call it a molecule. You can see the particles that this substance contains. And now these particles are randomly moving particles. They move means they diffuse. When we say something move, we mean something diffuse. They move and down the concentration gradient and becomes evenly spaced out after some times, right? They continue to move and they will be spread out. Now, diffusion is the net movement of particles from the region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration down a concentration gradient as a result of the random movement of these molecules of the substance that we are putting into consideration. Okay, so the random movement of this molecule, we spread these molecules or particles out of this place from all directions, upward, rightward, downwards, and leftward. All these particles will spread out and move from this high concentration region to other regions where the concentration is way lesser. Now, can particle diffuse across a membrane? Can particle diffuse across a membrane? Yes, it's possible for particles to diffuse across a membrane, but in the case of diffusion, we are not particular about membrane. Okay, diffusion can occur across a permeable membrane. Eventually, there will be equal concentration of all particles on both sides of the membrane. If you create a membrane, the particles, you see, you have the right side and the left side. The right side is potassium iodide. The left side is potassium iodide, the yellowish one. They are potassium iodide ions or molecules or particles. And then the right one, we have the copper sulfate ion, and you create a membrane between them. When you create a membrane between them, this will start to diffuse. The potassium iodide on the left will start to diffuse through this membrane. They will start to go to the right side. And the ones on the right side, which is copper sulfate, will move to the left side. A point will reach where they will mix up. They will mix up like almost equal number of the left and right, but a mixture of both potassium iodide and copper sulfate is what you have here. So eventually, there will be equal concentration of all particles of both sides of the membrane. Okay, if you take two substances and you create a membrane between them. That's what happens in this scenario. Now let's take a look at this one. Here, we are now going to factors. We are going to factors that affect the rate of diffusion. Factors that affect the rate of diffusion of particles or of molecules. The higher the temperature, the faster the rate of diffusion. So, for example, if you put substances and you heat them up, let's say water at 70 degrees, you see the water molecules will start to evaporate or will start to get ready to evaporate, or like when the water is at 10 degrees Celsius. So the higher the temperature, the faster the rate of diffusion that will take place in the substance. Now let's move on to the next one. What are the factors that affect the rate of diffusion? Let's begin to mention them. Number one was temperature. We said the higher the temperature, the faster the rate of diffusion. The higher the temperature, the faster the rate of diffusion. The second factor, you need to know these factors in your exam. Number one, temperature. Number two, diffusion distance. And number three, surface area to volume ratio. Surface area to volume ratio. You need to understand each of this one. Now, number 2 is the distance. The shorter the distance, the shorter the diffusion distance, the faster the rate of diffusion. The shorter the distance, if you make the distance long, the rate of diffusion will be very low or very slow. Okay, so the shorter the diffusion distance, the faster the rate of diffusion. Okay, so the shorter the distance, the faster the rate of diffusion. Now the surface of each potato, we have a big potato and a small one, right? The surface of each potato strip will turn blue black when it comes in contact with iodine solution. Now it takes more time for the blue-black color to reach the center of the thicker potato strip than the shorter potato strip. So it will take more time for the iodine solution to reach the center of the thicker potato strip than it will reach the center of the shorter one, right? Now the rate of diffusion is slower across a longer diffusion distance. It's slower across a longer diffusion distance. So that's that. Now let's go to the third one. What are the factors that affect the rate of diffusion? Diffusion is very, very important. Diffusion is an important way by which oxygen and carbon dioxide can move into and out of the cells, out of the lung cells. Diffusion is very important. It's one way the oxygen can move into the cell or carbon dioxide can move out of the cells. This is very important. So in animals, we know that oxygen diffuses into the cells by diffusion and probably diffusion, and then carbon dioxide on the other side will diffuse out, will move out of the cell by process of diffusion, right? Now, exchange surfaces have a short diffusion distance. Like exchange surfaces like the alveoli in the lungs, they have shorter diffusion distances. Okay, for the oxygen to diffuse into the bloodstream, to the arteries, and leave the arteries into the lungs or the alveolus of the lungs, the diffusion distance really has to be very short. Really has to be very short. So you can see diffusions in plant and in animal. You can see oxygen and carbon dioxide as it diffuses through the animals, and you can see carbon dioxide from red blood cells diffuses out of the red blood cells. The carbon dioxide diffuses out of the red blood cells, and oxygen diffuses into oxygen from the air diffuses into the red blood cells. Okay, you can see as it takes place in this structure. Then you can see carbon dioxide diffuses out of the root hair cells. Carbon dioxide diffuses out of the root hair cells. Carbon dioxide diffuses out of the root hair cells, and oxygen diffuses into the root hair cells. Okay, so all these processes are by diffusion. Now let's take a look at the third factor, which is the third factor that affects the rate of diffusions of molecules or ions. The third one is surface area to volume ratio. Now this is what we call surface area to volume ratio. Now you can calculate the area of this face. 1 times 1 is 1 centimeter square, and this one 2 times 2 is 2 centimeters square. So this 4 centimeters square. This one, the surface area of this face. If I'm considering this face alone, if I want the area, okay, if I want the area of this face, the area is 2 times 2, which is 4 centimeters square. If I do the area of this face, is 1 times 1. 1 multiplied 1 centimeter times 1 centimeter. See this 1 centimeter, if you're looking for area first. So the area here is 1 centimeter square. This is 4 centimeters square. This is 1 centimeter square. Okay, this is 1 centimeter square. And this is 3 times 3, 9 centimeters square. Right? This one is 9 centimeters square. Now, this is 9 centimeters square. Now you can ascertain the volume of each one, because we say surface area to volume ratio. So what's the volume of this one? 3 times 3 times 3, that's 27. So area to volume ratio of this one is 9 to 27. So 27 divided by 9, if we 27 divided by 9, we get ratio 1 to 3, right? We get ratio 1 to 3 for this one. Ratio 1 to 3. If you break this one down. If you do this one, what is the volume of this? 2 times 2 times 2, that's 8. So ratio, this one is 2 to 2 to 8. So if you break this one down, this will be ratio 1 to 2. Ratio 1 to ratio 2. Okay, because the volume of this one is 8. 2 times 2 times 2. So the volume of this one is 8. 8 divided by 4, you get 2. So this is ratio 1 to 2. The volume of this one is 1. 1 times 1 times 1 is still 1. You divide, the lowest term will be 1. Okay? So you can see this ratio 1 to 1, this ratio 1 to 2, this ratio 1 to 3. Okay? Or ratio 3 to 1 if you are looking at this one. Now we say, what's the surface area of this? 1 times 6. Okay, maybe they've given us 6 as something to multiply the area. Maybe there are 6 of it. Volume factor will be 1 times 1 times 1, which is 1. Now the surface area to volume is 6 to 1. Because maybe there are 6 of this, you say, look at this example, and we are multiplying by 6. I take each of them. Let's see this one. Surface area is 2 times 2 times 24. 24 has been given as the factor to multiply. So we get 2 times 2 times 6, we get 24. So we are multiplying each one by 6. We multiply each one by 6 for our area. We are multiplying each one by 6 for our area. Okay? Surface area. Because there are 6 surfaces, right? Okay, the one we did before was just for one surface. There are 6 surfaces. That's why we are multiplying by 6. So here is the area of this one is 1 times 1, which is 1. Then, because there are 6 surfaces on this cube, you multiply by 6, you get 6 centimeters squared. You multiply this one by 6, you get 2 times 2, you get 4. This 4, 4 times 6, we get 24 centimeters squared. Then, this one, 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 6, we get 54 centimeters squared. Now, what's the volume of the cube? Volume is 27 for this one. 3 times 3 times 3, 27. Now, what's the volume of this one? 2 times 2 times 2, 8. What's the volume of this one? 1 times 1 times 1, 1. So surface area to volume, you know this one, the area was 6. The total surface area was 6. So you say 6 divided by 6 to 1. And this one, what is the area? 24 to 8. 24 to 8. 24 to 8 will be 3 to 1. Because 8 divided by 8, you get 1. 24 divided by 8, you get 3. So you get ratio 3 to 1. This one, you get, the volume is 3 times 3 times 3, which is 27. So you say 54, the total surface area is 54. 54 divided by 27, you get ratio 2 to 1. You get ratio 2 to 1, right? So this one is ratio 2 to 1. This one is ratio 3 to 1. This one is ratio 6 to 1. Okay? Now, the increase in the surface area is not as much as the increase in the volume. Now the surface area to volume ratio decreases. It decreases. Look at it. It's decreasing as you increase the size. It's decreasing as you increase the size. Okay. So we say the greater the surface area per volume, the faster the rate of diffusion. The greater the surface area, meaning the substance will diffuse here because this one is greater. The substance will diffuse most from here than in this one. The greater the surface area to the volume, the faster the rate of diffusion for a given concentration gradient, right? So why do cells not grow beyond a certain size? Okay, so the greater the surface area to volume, the faster the rate of diffusion. So you calculate the area and you calculate the total surface area, and then you compare with the volume. You get the ratio for this, the ratio for this, the ratio for this. The bigger one, surface area to volume, the faster the rate of diffusion. Now let's take a look at another case where we are not considering the whole total surface area. If we are considering only one phase, okay, what are the factors that affect the rate of diffusion? Now here, each shade represents a unit volume of a cytoplasm. This shade, each phase represents a unit volume of a cytoplasm. Okay? So when we see an arrow going up, it means waste product is going out of the cell. When we see a red arrow going in, it means food and oxygen are going into the cell. Like this one, we say food and oxygen going in with the red one. The blue one is showing that waste products like carbon dioxide and other things, waste products are generally going out of the cell. Okay? So The dashed lines are the imaginary lines, okay? Now, we say cell A1 can obtain food and oxygen from all sides. See, cell A can obtain food and oxygen from all sides, right? From all the sides. And it carries out activities like growth very efficiently, effectively, and efficiently. So it does all of these three effects very well because all sides already represent the whole face. But if you look at this, there are four of the face. Only one face, this one is given out, okay? If you look at this one, X and Y, this is our Y, right? This one is our Y, okay? We say here, the X and Y have similar volumes. This is our X. The volume is similar, right? X and Y, this is X for the first one, which covers the whole face. But this one, the Y covers only 1/4 of the face of this cell, of cell A2. Okay? They have similar volume. Y has a reduced surface area. It has a reduced surface area because it's 1/4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are four of these for the whole face. For the whole face, there are four of this. So it has a reduced surface area. Thus, it receives nutrients and oxygen at a slower rate. Okay, it reduces nutrients and oxygen at a slower rate compared to this one. It reduces nutrients and oxygen at a slower rate when you compare to A1. Are you with me? When we compare to A1, this one reduces nutrient and oxygen when we are comparing it to A1 at a very slower rate. Now let's compare with this one. Z against Y against X. Z is just 1 out of 9. There are 9 faces. Remember this one, there were 4 faces. This is just 1 out of 9 on this whole face, on this big face, surface area. On this surface area, we divide it to 9 to be equivalent to X. So 1 of it out of 9. Z has the smallest surface area per unit volume. So it gets obviously get the lesser food or the least food and least oxygen when you compare it to X and Y. Okay, so this one, the rate of diffusion will be higher in this one than this one. And this one is higher than this one. The highest of them all is this one. The rate of diffusion is highest in this one because it covers the entire surface area of this face. This one is just 1/4 of the face, and this one is 1/9 of the face, even if X, Y, Z are equal. Even if the face of X, Y, Z are equal. Now let's move to the next one. How do cells adapt to surface area for absorption? Now we say some cells, they are adapted to absorb materials, right, from their environment. These cells often have long, narrow protrusions or folds in their membranes. They have folds in their membrane that enable absorption of substances into and out of the cell. Now what you see is from electron microscope, a colored electron micrograph from electron microscope that is showing high magnified microvilli. Microvillas are the absorption area in the small intestine into the bloodstream. Okay, how the digested food are being absorbed into the bloodstreams. Okay, so microvillas are tiny units of units of villi in the small intestine into the bloodstream, or of how nutrients that has been digested are being absorbed into the bloodstream. Is that okay? Now let's move on to the next one. Here is a question for us. It says we should find which one has the greater surface area to volume ratio. Okay, we should try this. We should pause the video and do this question. Now another question also: how are the root hair cells and the epithelial cells are of the small intestine and the red blood cells adapted for absorption of material? Okay, through the microvillas. Remember that. Okay, the microvillas, so that absorption can take place, the digestive food can move on. Now we go to the second part, which is called osmosis. We're done with digestion and diffusion. Now we go for osmosis. What is osmosis? Osmosis is the movement of substance or of molecules or water molecules from region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration through the use of a semi-permeable membrane, Okay, the movement of water molecules, this one we specify, is not just substance, but we say water molecules across a partially permeable membrane from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration. Okay, it's through a water potential, through water potential. So here we're talking about water molecules moving from high region to lower region. We're talking about water molecules moving from high region to lower region. And it's different from diffusion because it refers only to water molecule. Diffusion is both liquid and gas. Diffusion is for both liquid and gas, but osmosis is only for water molecules, and it takes place across partially permeable membrane. Osmosis happens across a partially permeable membrane. Now let's take a look at this. We have, you say, what is osmosis? We have 5% of sucrose solution, more water, less sucrose. Okay? More water, less sucrose, 5%, only 5% of sucrose, meaning there's more water, maybe 95% water. Here, 10% of sucrose solution, less water, more sucrose. Here you can see there's more sucrose because sucrose is 10% now, right? Sucrose is 10%, less water here. There's a membrane here. There's a partially permeable membrane. What will happen after some time? Remember, osmosis is the movement of water. Here there's more water. So here is higher water potential gradient. Here is higher for water. Remember that. It's not about the sucrose. Osmosis is in this regard. When we're talking about osmosis, we're referring to water. Where do you have more water? You have more water here because there's only 5% of sucrose. It means there's more water. Here you have 10% of sucrose, means here you have less water. So here you have lower water concentration gradient. You have lower water concentration. Here you have lower water concentration. So for osmotic reaction to take place, water we move through this semi-permeable membrane or partially permeable membrane from this side to this side. So water will move from the more water concentration region to, so you see this one, this what happens. More water move up this way, and you now see they are no more in equal level. They are no more equal level. More water has moved up to this side. That's why you see the level has risen on this other side. Let's move on. So here is a question for osmosis. It's about water molecule, movement of water molecule, okay? It's about the movement of water molecule. What is water potential and how it relates to osmosis? Here you have a dilute solution, and here you have a concentrated solution. Dilute solution means more water. So dilute solution, for something to be diluted, it means it contains more water than a concentrated solution. So when you have a dilute solution, that's where you have higher water concentration. Okay? Here you have lower water concentration. Here you have lower water concentration. So since dilute solution has more water, water molecule will move down the concentration gradient from this side to this side. Water molecule will move down. So this is for osmosis. Water molecule will move down concentration gradient from the top, from the higher region to the lower region. Remember this, okay? Water molecules, osmosis is the net movement of the water molecules through a partially permeable membrane from the region of higher concentration, higher water concentration to a region of lower water concentration. Now let's move on. Now what happens to a plant cells in a solution with a higher concentration of water? When you have higher concentration of water, osmosis will happen into the cell, and the cell will become toxic. The cell will become toxic. Okay? The cell will become toxic. Okay? Toxicity, it becomes swollen. Cell will become swollen, and it might burst. Okay? So by osmosis, water enters the cell through the partially permeable cell membrane. So when that happens, the substance becomes swollen, the cell becomes swollen, and it becomes toxic. Now the toxicity of the cell with water is called the turgor. It's called the turgor. Okay? Toxicity of water is called turgor, meaning there's more water has entered the cell, and the cell is swollen, and the cell may become an issue. The pressure exerted by the water in the vacuum is the turgor pressure, which will cause a lot of damage to the cell. Now let's move on quickly. What happens to an animal cell in a solution of higher water concentration? Okay, toxicity will happen, right? So animal cell does not have a cell wall. Since it does not have a cell wall, the only cell membrane, the membrane is partially permeable. It's partially permeable, meaning more water will move from higher water concentration of the cytoplasm into the cell, right? So the cell will expand and burst. The cell will expand. We get bigger because more water go into it, and it will expand and burst, and then there will be trouble. What happens to the cell in the solution of same water potential? The cell will not change in their size or will not change in their shape if they have same water concentration. Okay, whether there's no higher or lower, then the cell will nothing will happen to it. What happens to a plant cell in a solution with a lower concentration of water? Lower concentration of water, the cell will dry up and die. The cell will become flaccid. The cell decreases in size and become limped. And then if there's lower water concentration, the cell will become limped. It will dry up and will become flaccid, not toxic now. It will not be turgor. It will become flaccid and will die. And it will die. Is that okay? The cell will eventually still die. What happens to animal cells in a concentration of lower water? It will dry. Lower water concentration, it means it will dry up. The animal cells in a solution with lower water concentration, what will happen to it? Become flaccid. Become flaccid, shrink. Flaccidity means it will shrink, and the process is called crenation. The cell shrink and little sparks appears on the cell membrane. You can see some sparks will appear on it. It will shrink. The cell, if it has less water concentration, the cell will shrink and you see something like spark, and this process is called crenation. And the flaccidity will eventually happen, and it will dry up and die. So both toxicity and flaccidity, they are not good. Both toxicity and flaccidity are not good. We need equal water concentration. Okay? So turgor is important for maintaining the shape of soft tissue in plant. Okay? Tissue that are soft, they need turgor. Okay? Turgor made them soft. Plants are designated to be soft, they need a lot of water to go into them to keep that softness. Changes in the turgor of the guard cells cause the openings and the closings of the stomata. Now this is electron microscope of a stomata, how it looks. You see the hole, you can see the hole. Electron microscope, see how this where it is diffuse to it, okay, into the cell, in and out of the cell. Now let's take a look at the plasmolysis causes cell to become limp or flaccid. Plasmolysis causes cell to be, the process known, in the exam they may ask you to explain what is plasmolysis. Plasmolysis is the process whereby water move from lower water concentration. Okay, there's lower water concentration and the tea becomes flaccid and shrinked and lipped. Okay, so that process where it becomes shrinked and lipped is called flaccidity. The process is known as plasmolysis. Okay, flaccidity leads to plasmolysis. You need to know this in the exam. You need to be able to explain plasmolysis and turgidity in the exam. Turgor pressure in the cell of the plant helps to keep the plant firm and upright. When there's a lot of water, it keeps. This is one benefit of turgor pressure. It helps to distribute the water and to keep the stem to be upright, to keep the stem to be upright. Loss of turgor due to excessive water loss can cause the plant to wither and shrink. Okay? Now let's move to the next one. Now what are the differences between diffusion and osmosis? First of all, we say diffusion is the net movement of substances. These substances could be gaseous or could be solute. Net movement of substances. Okay? While osmosis is the net movement of water molecule. Another difference is that of diffusion is the movement of particles down a concentration gradient, while osmosis is the movement of water molecule from a dilute solution to a concentrated solution. From region where you have more water to region where you have less water. From dilute to concentrated through a semi-permeable or partially permeable membrane. Now, osmosis, partially permeable membrane, not required for osmosis to happen, but for diffusion to happen. Partially permeable membrane is not required, but in osmosis, partially permeable membrane is a necessity. Okay, so let's move to the next one. The last of this section is called the active transport. Now, what is active transport? Active transport is the movement of particles through a cell membrane from a region of lower. Now, this one is the movement of substances from lower to higher. Okay, remember the first two we treated is from higher to lower, but this one is from lower to higher. So it will require energy. It will require energy to push them up the slope. It requires energy to put the molecules or substances up the slope, because they are moving against the concentration gradient. You are moving against the gradient. So this one, active transport requires energy from respiration. Remember this in multiple choice exam. It requires carrier protein. It also requires a carrier protein molecule in the cell, and also involves the movement of substances against their concentration gradient. Active transport requires energy, and it requires carrier protein, and it requires the movement of substance against the concentration gradient. So for active transport, you are moving from the lower to the higher. You're moving against, remember, you're moving against the slope. You're going up. For active transport, you're moving up from lower region. You're moving from lower region to higher region. For active transport, you're moving from lower region to higher region, right? While diffusion and osmosis, diffusion, you're moving down the gradient, concentration gradient. You're moving down, you're going down. But active transport, you're going up from lower to higher. So let's take a look at the differences. Active transport is the movement of particles through a cell membrane. It also needs a cell membrane from a region of lower concentration to a region of higher concentration, right? Now, what are the key differences between diffusion and active transport? First of all, in diffusion, diffusion is the net movement of substances. It's always substances because it's not only gas molecule, both gas, liquid, solute. Okay? So it's the movement of substances, so whether they are gaseous or they are solute. While active transport is the movement of dissolved solute. Not gas, dissolved solute. The movement of dissolved solutes, like solution. The movement of dissolved solute, like solution. Okay, like digested food. Your nutrients, when they get digested, you know it's a mixture. It's like a liquid now. It's a solution. And how they move into the blood, into the arteries from the villi of your small intestine requires an active transport. Okay, another example is the movement of particle for diffusion is the movement of particle down a concentration gradient, while active transport is the movement of particle against a concentration gradient. You are moving against, you are going up, you are climbing hill, you are moving up the slope, okay, for active transport. While diffusion, you are going down the slope. The third one is that diffusion, energy from respiration is not required. You don't need energy from respiration for diffusion to take place. But in osmosis, in active transport, energy from respiration is required. Energy from respiration is needed. You need energy from respiration. Diffusion, cell membrane is not required, but active transport, just like osmosis, you also need a cell membrane. You need a cell membrane for active transport. So you can see 4 differences between active transport and diffusion. 4 differences between active transport and diffusion. Where does active transport occur? Let's take a look at places where active transport normally takes place. Okay, active transport occurs only in living cells because only living cells we have carry out respiration. Because remember, we need energy from respiration. So only living cells that diffusion and that active transport can take place. Not like the perfume in the case of diffusion. Diffusion can happen in a non-living things. Okay, but osmosis active transport will only take place in a living cell, like inside our body, digested food, how they diffuse it how they move it to the bloodstream or into the arteries. Okay, they require active transport. In plant, root hair cells takes in mineral ion from the soil, okay, from the soil solution through diffusion and as well as active transport. So the root hair cells take in mineral ions. You know, mineral ion is a solution. Mineral ions, meaning dissolved magnesium and nitrates dissolved in water, is called mineral ions. The mineral ions, they go in through diffusion and through active transport. So both methods, okay? Both through diffusion and through active transport. Let's look at the mineral ions in the soil, okay? Here, there are more concentrations of the mineral ions here than what you have in the soil. So they are moving against the concentration gradient. They are moving against those ones from higher region, they will go through diffusion. Those ones from lower spread out in the soil will go in through active transport into the root hair cell. Okay? So let's move to the next one. How does active transport occur? Active transport requires carrier protein. It's very important. It requires a carrier, something to carry it up the slope. It requires carrier protein in the cell membrane, something to take it across, to take it cross. If you want to cross a river, you need a boat. The boat is the carrier protein in this regard. Okay? Take a look at this carrier protein. This is the carrier protein. This is the carrier protein. This shape is the carrier protein. You see, these ions will be stick to this and it will be carried to the other side. Okay, this is the membrane. This is the membrane. This will help them to cross this place. We help them to cross this place. Okay. Now you take a look at this one. Okay, here is the lower concentration of the particle outside. This is the lower concentration. This is the higher concentration. So it needs a carrier protein to help them move across to the other side. Okay, here you have the energy. It requires the energy from respiration in order for it to take place. Okay, so let's move to the next one. I think we have almost come to the end of today's class. So we've studied three things: diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. So we have some IGCSE questions that you can look at. In IGCSE exam, it says define osmosis. We already know that osmosis is the movement of water molecules. So it's 3 marks. So you must give at least 3 points. Movement of water, you must measure water molecule. H2O. Let me just use the symbol of water in chemistry. H2O. The movement, the net movement of water molecule from through a semi-permeable membrane. You must measure a semi-permeable membrane or partially. Okay, use the word partially permeable membrane. Partially permeable membrane in order to get your second mark. Okay, partially permeable membrane. Partially permeable membrane. The third one, from which region to which region? For osmosis, higher to lower. So I'll just use H for higher to lower. Higher to lower. You must measure these 3 things in order to get the 3 marks. Now give 2 examples of molecules that are small enough to diffuse through a membrane. 2 molecules. Okay, you can measure potassium iodide and calcium sulfate. They are small enough to diffuse through a membrane. Okay, potassium iodide. We can measure potassium iodide in the exam. Okay, potassium iodide. Okay, you can write it in full. And copper sulfate, right? Copper sulfate. So you measure all this, you get your marks. List 3 factors that increase the rate of diffusion. So 3 factors. Number 1, increased temperature. So you must write that increase in temperature because they say that we increase the rate of diffusion. So you must measure them. Arrow up means it increases the rate of diffusion. So when I put arrow temperature, it means that we should increase the temperature. If I put arrow up, if I put the arrow down, it means decrease temperature. So you say increase in temperature. So you say increase in temperature, number 1 factor. Increase in temperature. Number 2 factors that increase the rate of diffusion, the surface area to volume ratio. Okay, increase in surface area to volume ratio. So increase in surface area to volume ratio. Increase the surface area to volume ratio. Number 3, what is diffusion distance? Shorter diffusion distance. So you say shorter diffusion distance. Okay, these questions are taken from Cambridge IGCSE past paper. Shorter distance. Okay, shorter diffusion distance. You can write diffusion distance, but just for me to write quickly, I just write shorter diffusion. So with this, we've come to the end of our today's class, and thank you for joining our class.